Hi, ArcfieldWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, February the 6th. A lot to talk about this morning. The pattern change we've been alluding to for the last several days in the central and eastern U.S. with respect to the temperatures is definitely on the way. It looks like it will really get underway in earnest next week, and it will have some staying power. By that I mean once we change to a colder weather pattern in the central and eastern states, it's liable to last into March, maybe even well into March. That doesn't mean every single day will be below normal, but on average, that period from the middle of February to perhaps the middle of March looks probably colder than normal across much of the central and eastern states, and no doubt there will be some snow threats as well along the way. A couple of things I want to update this morning. First of all, the stratospheric warming event that has really been ongoing since late November. And then we'll take a look at the latest Southern Oscillation Index, which is really indicating a strengthening El Nino as we go into this second half of the winter season. That could make for a very interesting last half of the winter season. First of all, this is the temperature pattern at 10 millibars, way up there in the atmosphere, what we call the stratospheric level. We're kind of looking at a top-down view. The North Pole right in this circle area right here, that's the North Pole. The U.S. is located down here on this particular kind of a map. Again, we're looking at temperatures, actual temperatures, not anomalies, but actual temperatures at focused on the polar region of the northern hemisphere. And as we speak right now, we have kind of a rather typical polar vortex that is sitting right near the North Pole. This is the normal set of circumstances this time of the year. However, this particular winter season and other winter seasons, we get what we call stratospheric warming events, where kind of a blob of warmer air moves in towards the polar region and sometimes displaces the polar vortex to well away from the North Pole. Sometimes it breaks it apart into multiple pieces, and we've had kind of a little bit of both this winter season. It looks to me like there's a third burst of warming that's coming over the next 10 to 15 days or so, and that very well could extend our change to colder in the central and eastern U.S. well into the month of March. I've talked before about stratospheric warming events tend to set off a chain of events in the atmosphere that can result in temperature pattern changes across the U.S. maybe some 4 to 6 weeks later. And we'll see in a moment here. We had one in December, a second one in January that I think will contribute to this change to colder beginning next week, and perhaps a third one that could have an impact all the way into the month of March. Again, this is where we stand right now. 10 days out from now, it switches to this. We have this warm air, relative warm air. Of course, it's very cold over the polar region, but relative to what's going on associated with that polar vortex, this is a blob of warming. Here's the North Pole right here. So that we go from this currently to this in 10 days, another burst of warming that very likely will continue a colder than normal weather pattern in the central and eastern states into the month of March. Now here's another way to view this stratospheric warming. The red line here represents the actual temperatures at the 10 millibar level, the stratospheric level here for the polar region. This is really from the North Pole down to 65 degrees north, averaged out in that polar region of the northern hemisphere. And you can see we had this what I call one burst, the first burst of warming here in that late November to mid-December time period. Then we had a second burst right here, early to mid-January. This particular stratospheric warming event, I think, contributed to our very cold week in the middle of January across much of the nation. It lasted for more than a week. Then this particular stratospheric warming event, or burst of warming, early to mid-January, I think will contribute to another round of very cold weather for much of the central and eastern U.S. starting the middle part of February. That's that 4 to 6 week time period, or that lag from the stratospheric warming over the North Pole and its ultimate impact on the U.S. Now, in some cases, the stratospheric warming has an effect on the other side of the pole, over places like Siberia or China or Russia or whatever. And in this particular circumstance, I think we're talking about on this side of the North America side of the North Pole with this. And in all likelihood, notice here, the stratospheric temperature has dropped down, but I think looks like there will be another burst here, a third burst coming over the next week to 10 days or so, maybe out 2 weeks, and that could play a role in the U.S. temperature pattern come March. Well, that's kind of an update on stratospheric warming. Again, a third burst of warming coming that certainly can play a role in extending a colder temperature change in the central and eastern states all the way into March. And here's another indicator I like to look at this time of the year. It's called the Southern Oscillation Index. We've shown this the last few videos because really it's very impressive what's going on. This is on a daily basis. The more the negative, the SOI, the stronger the El Nino, and it has dropped way down there, well below the normal threshold. Normally, the SOI is kind of considered to be in El Nino territory if it gets to maybe -5, -10. This has just dropped like a rock in the last several days. This is up to date too. This is actually February 6th, now down to -41. That tells me a few things. And El Nino is intensifying right now, and that will continue to activate that southern branch of the jet stream, that subtropical jet that will play a role in California and across the southern states for the next few weeks here. So this, if anything, tells us that we'll continue to have a stormy pattern, though there may be a break now for California for, let's say, the next week to 10 days or so. They too will get in on some of this action. Again, additional Pacific Ocean storms to hit California, I think maybe 10 days or 2 weeks on out whenever you see an SOI like this. So this is very interesting how it's just dropped like a rock again, likely leading to a very active southern branch of the jet stream affecting California all the way across the southern states and ultimately up along the Atlantic seaboard. Well, if you want to see what a pattern flip looks like with respect to temperatures, take a look at these ensemble runs. I'm showing 3 models here, the European model, then the GFS model, and then the Canadian model, using their ensemble runs from last night at 0Z. And what I want to just point out is the dramatic change that will be taking place across the U.S. in terms of the temperature pattern. We're looking at 850 millibar temperature anomalies, and point out the consistency between these models. There's virtually no doubt that this pattern change is coming starting next week. What we'll take a look at is this right here. This is the current 5-day period. This is the overall average over the current 5-day period, days 1 to 5, today the 6th to the 11th. The overall average, 850 millibar temperature anomalies, much above normal, extending from the Hudson Bay region down across the Great Lakes and into much of the central and eastern states. Take a look at what happens going out to days 9 to 13. We go to this. What a dramatic change. Again, from this in the current time period to this, days 9 to 13. This is beginning later next week, February 14th to the 19th. Quite a dramatic change, much colder than normal conditions across really the eastern 2/3 of the nation. Now, let's take a look at the GFS. Here's the GFS ensemble run again from last night at 6E. The days 1 to 5 and all the way out to days 9 to 13. A dramatic flip in the overall temperature pattern. Let's now take a look at the Canadian model. Here we go. Same sort of deal here. Days 1 to 5, the current 5-day period, and we go out days 9 to 13. Same as, very similar to the European and the GFS, perhaps even colder out in the western U.S. than those other 2 ensembles. But all 3 models here agreeing on this pattern change. And again, we've talked about a lot of the teleconnection indices and the stratospheric warming event that support this idea of a pattern change coming beginning next week. And I think it has some staying power, likely to last into the month of March and perhaps well into the month of March. Now, let's just take a look at one of these models, the ensemble from the European model of 0Z, and look at the 500 millibar height anomalies going forward on a day-to-day basis. The prior maps were, again, those 850 millibar temperature anomalies. Here's the 500 millibar height anomalies, and a lot of higher heights than normal as we begin this period today, Tuesday, February 6th, over the eastern part of Canada. Now, we will just push through here, and I'll point out a few important changes by the time we get to next week. And here we go now into the end of this week on Friday. Keep moving forward here. Again, this is using the ensemble run of the European model from last night at 0Z. And here's now Sunday, February 11th. Notice a pretty impressive trough right here over the central U.S. starting to set up. Now, watch what happens here over Canada here as we get into next week. Now, this is a week away from right now, next Tuesday, February 13th, and a couple things going on here. We have this higher heights than normal showing up here over northern Canada, kind of extending here at this particular time. This is now all the way out to the middle part of next week. So a few things I want to point out at this time. This is a week from Thursday, next Thursday, February 15th. First of all, higher heights than normal here over Greenland. This is kind of associated with that negative AO and negative NAO in this part of the northern hemisphere. Also, notice big ridge popping up here across the west coast of Canada, really extending down across the west coast of the U.S. as well, and up over Alaska. This is kind of associated with those teleconnection indices we talk about sometimes, the negative EPO, or right here, the positive PNA, that Pacific North America teleconnection index. Now, let me just clear the deck here, and when you see a flow like this, a couple things jump out at me. First of all, Pacific air that's generally quite mild, it's kind of shunted up towards Alaska at this particular time, and it does not flood the U.S. with mild Pacific air. When you see this ridge popping up, that's the importance of this ridge in terms of it turning colder in the central and eastern U.S. It tends to prevent mild air from the Pacific Ocean from flooding the U.S. Also, look at this flow way up northern part of Canada, up near the North Pole. It's generally potentially bringing some very cold air from the polar region, maybe in the other side of the pole, cross-polar down into the central and eastern U.S. Of course, we have this active southern branch of the jet stream right in this region as well. And these two troughs, in fact, let's move forward here in time, will tend to kind of link up. And this is all expecting that southern branch of the jet stream right here to become quite active, and that is absolutely believable here. This is now all the way out a week and a half to Sunday, February 18th. Here's your blocking over Greenland, kind of your classic blocking over Greenland. Here's your connection here between these two troughs, the one centered over the Atlantic, the one centered over the Pacific. This is your active southern branch of the jet stream. Again, there may be a break in the action for California for the next week to 10 days or so, but with that intensification in the El Nino, no doubt in my mind, they'll get hit again, maybe a week to 10 days and out, and this will remain quite an active zone here with that enhanced subtropical jet stream thanks to that intensifying El Nino. So again, blocking here over Greenland, perhaps cross-polar flow, bringing in some cold air masses way down from northern Canada into the central and eastern states, and continuation of that ridge here all the way out a week and a half from now. So again, I think this change in the overall pattern has some staying power. Now let's wrap up with the surface forecast maps from last night's 0Z run of the GFS, the conventional version of the GFS model from 0Z. Now, all signs point to the possibility of a storm system early next week in the eastern states. That will be on the front end of this transition to a colder than normal weather pattern for the central and eastern states. Can we get snow at the front end of that transition? Sure, we can get snow in the, let's say, the I-95 corridor region on the front end. It's harder than if you had established cold air to begin with. So that's what we're dealing with right now. It's way too early to say for sure what will happen early next week, but there certainly can be a storm that we'll have to deal with in the Mid-Atlantic region at the front end of this transition. So let's move forward here and go through the sequence of events. We have a big warm-up coming for Friday and Saturday. Just look at this flow here on Thursday out across the Mississippi Valley. This is a southwesterly flow, and there'll be a burst of warming at the surface level up across the Midwest, the Great Lakes, and that translates into the eastern states by the time we get to Friday and Saturday. Possibility of 60 plus degrees in that Friday, Saturday time frame. Places like D.C. along the I-95 corridor region of the Mid-Atlantic region. But that will kind of be the end of that surge in warmth, and the pattern begins to change early next week. Here we are now all the way out to Sunday. This is February 11th, Sunday, and you start to see some colder air filtering in. Again, this is kind of the front end of the transition coming next week that we saw confirmed by all the ensemble runs of all the models here. And the GFS from last night, don't get too excited by this yet if you love snow in the Mid-Atlantic region, but it has an all-out snowstorm for the Mid-Atlantic region a week from now. This is next Tuesday time frame, again, kind of at the front end of that transition. It's I would say more difficult to get accumulating snow on the front end because you typically would like to see established cold air in the Mid-Atlantic region. The GFS, excuse me, the Canadian model has rain in this particular event early next week. The European model is more like the GFS with a colder solution, more snow and ice. So this is something we'll of course focus in on over the next several days, the possibility of a storm system in the Mid-Atlantic region. And we know we have that active southern branch of the jet stream. The question here is how much cold air comes in early next week. Again, the front end of that overall pattern change here. Now, a couple things about snowfall this time of the year. One positive and one negative if you live in the I-95 corridor region. The negative is we're getting now at this particular time down out to the middle part of February past the climatological low point for temperatures in the Mid-Atlantic region. Let's say about the third week, maybe the fourth week of January on a climatological basis is the coldest time of the year for the Mid-Atlantic region. So for Philadelphia, as an example, to get a snowstorm mid to late January, probably want temperatures maybe 5 to 10 degrees below normal. Normal high maybe 40 degrees, third week of January in Philly. So you want high temperatures to be maybe 5 to 10 degrees below that. When you're talking about mid-February, climatological norms are going up, so you probably need to have temperatures some 10 to 15 degrees below normal in the middle and latter part of February, as opposed to that 5 to 10 degrees below normal mid to late January. So that's one factor. On the positive side, if you are hoping for snow in the I-95 corridor region, the sea surface temperatures this time of the year actually reach their bottom. Late February, early March, sea surface temperatures continue to drop. There is a lag in the ocean temperatures, so those waters off the New Jersey coastline actually continue to bottom out over the next few weeks into the month of March. So any kind of a low-level northeast flow later in February or even in March will be more favorable for snow than something in December, for example, or early January. Again, on the positive side, if you're looking for snow this time of the year, those sea surface temperatures still dropping and reach their bottom late February or early March time frame. So we'll go out a little farther in time, and it moves this storm system, quite impressive storm system, well off the coast by the middle of next week. A long way to go for that. I think what is certain, we have a major pattern change setting up for the central and eastern states beginning next week. It looks like there may be a storm system to deal with in the Mid-Atlantic region at the front end of that transition next Monday, Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday time frame of next week. Too early to say. rain or snow. As far as California is concerned, they're still being impacted by this latest storm. They'll have a break in the action for the next 7 to 10 days or so, but then that El Nino enhanced southern branch of the jet stream will bring more storms into California later on in the month of February, probably going into March as well. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.